Hey, so tell me, have you ever had a day like this where you've woken up and the sun is shining and you're surrounded by all the good things and nature is all beautiful, the birds are singing, life is good, you seem to get out of bed the right way, your friends are all chirpy, your housemates, your family, whoever is there is all chirpy and happy around you, your day is good with your job or with your study or your school or whatever it is, everything just flows. And there's just one thing, the person that is closest to you, that you are so blissfully aware of with love, everything's going beautifully, and all of a sudden they give you the silent treatment because you've screwed up, you've done something that has upset them. You might not even know what it is, but you just know that clearly it's upset them because they're not even talking to you, right? So that can be quite painful. They start not talking to you about it, they ignore you, you say good morning, they shame you down by not even saying a single word. So they don't even want to know you, and all of a sudden you become strangers. And they might have a moment, a pensive moment, where they're processing something that you've said or done that you may not even be aware of, but it goes on, it drags on, and the silent treatment turns into this means of power in a sense, because you don't know what you've done wrong. So you end up chasing your tail trying to find out what it was. In the meantime, they hold this heavy weight of silence over you. And what do you do about it? I've experienced this more than once in my life. So when I was a lot younger, growing up, I guess instead of my parents smacking me too much, which I'm grateful for that they didn't belt the crap out of me, but they did go through the silent treatment. So when they went through the silent treatment, I was left alone to process what I'd done wrong. It's like the naughty corner, right? But when you're a child, you really need to know what you've done wrong. Like, your parents going to berate you for something, chances are, and hopefully, they will communicate with you about what it is in actual fact that you've done wrong, so that you're not left wondering, because otherwise, how do you correct something that you've done to hurt a friend or anger someone if you don't even know what it is, right? So, as you get older in life, they're not scars, but they kind of like they groove back in again. They remind you of all those feelings that you went through when you were young. And they kind of, it's not just me, it's everyone. Like, I actually did it. I always thought that it was better to have the silent treatment with someone who screwed up in my life rather than to confront them and be angry and, you asshole, whatever, right? Because I thought, well, it's better to only say nice things, or otherwise you shouldn't speak at all. So that was the mentality I grew up with, and I guess my parents grew up with that too. So I would do that. So I'm just as guilty of the people that might be pinning into this, that might be hurting you. But then over time, I learned what it was like, call it karma if you will. I learned what it was like to be back on the receiving end. And I was like, wow, you know what? My whole life, I've gone through life without even knowing half the time what I've done wrong. So the only thing I ended up coming to terms with was that clearly I was being rejected because of something I did. I didn't even know what it was, but my mere presence was obviously enough to upset them. So there was one particular partner I had who used to actually give the silent treatment for up to 2 weeks. I thought that was absolutely undeniably cruel, and I won't back down on that. That, in a sense, is abuse. Okay, so now when someone's giving a silent treatment, there's 2 types of silent treatment that I could isolate. I'm sure you could think of more. 2 I wanted to talk about was that one is like silence is violence if it's used in an appropriate way. If it's done in such a way as to be cruel, unkind, or controlling. So if you're doing it to control somebody else into doing your bidding to make peace, then that's not right. That's controlling, that's abuse, okay? If you're doing it for the sake of keeping peace and joining your love together, then be mindful of how you're doing it. And what I'm saying is, like, you and I have a fight, right? Now, you really hurt me with what you said, but if I I don't talk to you about what you've said, you might not even know to the degree. You can see to the degree that it's hurt me, but you still don't know why. So chances are there'll be other triggers that will set me off that way. So it's up to me to communicate with you about what it was that impacted me that way. Some people find it hard to deal with it face-to-face because it feels confrontational. I'm one of those people. Write it. Walk it out. Think about it. Ask for a little bit of time, but keep that space with your partner just enough to let them know that you are just going for a walk. You'll have to think about it and put it into context, but you will come back, and it doesn't stop you loving them, but you might not have loved what was said to you or how you had to come to terms with something that you didn't feel was right. Okay, be honest, right? But hold their hand or look in their eyes if you can. If they're functional and reasonable, if they're unreasonable, maybe it's time to even look at leaving them. But if they're functional and reasonable, then they should be able to understand, because you've pointed out to them, one, that you care about them, and this is not the end of it just because you're upset about it, but that you want to also rationalize things in your head, get everything in context, and know what you're saying before you say it. Why would anyone be upset with you for that? You're not just doing it as a reactionary, you're doing it because you want to make sense to that person. And together you can avoid that being an issue somewhere else down the track. If you have got peaceful, loving silence, then that is working toward each other. Your focus, your attention, your energy is about creating something alive and abundantly full of love together. And in order to do that, you've got to meet each other somewhere in the middle. You have to be ready to compromise old ways for new things. Because if you don't, and I don't, then we're always going to be stuck in the same old situations. And saying that one thing worked with an ex-partner is not enough to make this happen, because each one of us is unique. And you are no less worthy of making this work than what your partners, than the ex of your partner or your ex or whatever. Everyone is just as worthy, but everyone is totally unique. So each experience, it might repeat itself to some degree, but how you process it when you are together in a new relationship, everything has to be new. You have to learn to communicate in a different way. Okay, we have to learn how to communicate in a different way. So great if it worked with an old partner, but get over it, evolve. It didn't work that well because otherwise it wouldn't be an ex, and they are an ex, right? So this whole foundation is based on trust and a sacred space between you, where you know that just because you've had an altercation with each other or a misunderstanding does not mean that it's totally the end of a relationship. So one, reassure your partner it's not the end of the relationship, or that you just need to weigh things up because you don't really get where they're at and you're too emotionally drawn into it to be able to look at it properly. When I'm saying take time out, please don't go down to the pub and get smashed, because that's not the right time to be coming back and bringing your feelings to the table, and you know that somewhere deep inside of you. Or go to take drugs, that's not going to work either. If you want to go for a walk, go for a jog, do whatever you like. But if you're doing it where you're just like, no, I'm not going to talk to you anymore, what age does that remind you of? A 4-year-old? A 2-year-old? Better go. And they refuse to talk, they refuse to communicate. And it's like you're trying to budge a stone, and over time that corrodes a relationship. In the end, you lead two separate lives that are incredibly toxic when you come together, and so much has been shelved under the floor, under the carpet, that it's too hard to reconcile those differences, because it was this and this and this and this and this and this and this that peed you off in the first place. And there's too many mountains that you've got to chip down to sort out the original problem and whether it was worth holding on to. So silence is not about, even if somebody's saying to you that they are being silent because they're unhappy with you and they need to be on their own, and they go off and they do their own thing and they're actually nasty or cruel and totally ignore you without actually talking with you about why, it's just downright cruel. Don't waste your time with them. It's not going to get better until they get better.